Sometimes the greatest victories come from the deepest wounds. When Sarah Blackhorse received that reunion invitation after 25 years, her hands trembled not from excitement, but from a memory of cruel laughter echoing through school hallways. They had called her names, mocked her heritage, and made her teenage years a nightmare of shame and isolation. Now they wanted her back. But Sarah wasn't the broken girl they remembered. She had transformed pain into purpose, silence into strength, and humiliation into honor. What her former classmates didn't know was that the quiet Apache girl they had tormented had become someone extraordinary, someone who would arrive at their reunion in a way that would leave them speechless and change their understanding of power, respect, and true success forever. This is the story of how one woman turned her greatest shame into her most powerful weapon, and how a single moment can rewrite the narrative of an entire lifetime. Sarah Blackhorse stood at her kitchen window, watching the morning sun paint the New Mexico mountains in shades of gold and copper. The envelope in her hands felt heavier than its simple weight suggested. 25 years had passed since she walked the halls of Riverside High School, and now they wanted her back for a reunion. She turned the invitation over in her weathered fingers, studying the cheerful graphics and fancy lettering. "Come celebrate with the class of 1999, it proclaimed in bright blue letters. Below that, in smaller print, "Let's see what everyone's been up to." The exclamation points felt like tiny daggers, each one reminding her of the enthusiasm she had never been allowed to share during those 4 painful years. The memory hit her without warning, as it often did. She was 17 again, standing in the cafeteria with her lunch tray, searching for an empty seat. The whispers followed her like shadows. "There goes the Apache princess," someone would sneer. "Does she live in a teepee?" another would ask, loud enough for everyone to hear. The worst part wasn't the ignorance. It was the deliberate cruelty in their voices, the way they turned her heritage into a weapon against her. Sarah had grown up on the Mescalero Apache reservation, raised by her grandmother Maria after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8. Her grandmother had filled their small house with stories of their ancestors, teaching Sarah about the strength and wisdom of their people. But when Sarah received a scholarship to attend the predominantly white high school in the nearby town, those stories felt like fragile treasures that could be shattered by the harsh reality of teenage cruelty. She remembered how she had tried to make herself invisible, wearing oversized clothes and keeping her long black hair pulled forward to hide her face. She excelled in her studies, particularly in mathematics and science, but even her academic achievements became targets for mockery. "Of course she's good at math," someone had said once, loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Indians are good with numbers. They have to count all their casino money." The teacher had done nothing. They rarely did. Sarah set the invitation down on the granite countertop of her kitchen and walked to the window that overlooked her property. Her house sat on 500 acres of pristine land, a modern architectural marvel that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, and in the distance, she could see the research facility where she had spent the last decade developing revolutionary water purification systems. The irony wasn't lost on her. The girl they had mocked for being primitive now held 17 patents for environmental technology. The casino Indian stereotype they had thrown at her had become irrelevant when she sold her first company for $60 million. But success, she had learned, didn't automatically heal old wounds. She picked up her phone and scrolled through the reunion's Facebook page. The comments made her stomach tighten. "Can't wait to see everyone," wrote Jennifer Morrison, who had once asked Sarah if she knew how to use indoor plumbing. "It's been too long," posted Brad Stevens, who had organized a group of students to make war whoops whenever Sarah walked by. But it was the private message that had arrived with the invitation that truly revealed their intentions. It came from Melissa Crawford, who had been the unofficial leader of Sarah's tormentors. "Sarah," it read, "we're so excited you might come to the reunion. It would be amazing to see how you turn out. We're all so curious about what you've been doing all these years. Please say you'll be there." The message felt poisonous with false sweetness. Sarah could read between the lines. They wanted her to come so they could satisfy their curiosity about the quiet Indian girl they had broken. They probably expected to find her defeated, struggling, maybe working at a casino, or living on government assistance. They wanted to confirm their old prejudices, to prove to themselves that their treatment of her had been justified. She thought about her grandmother, who had passed away 3 years earlier. Maria Blackhorse had been a woman of incredible dignity and strength. She had survived the trauma of forced boarding schools, where officials had tried to kill the Indian in her. She had raised 6 children during the hardest times on the reservation, and she had never let bitterness consume her heart. Granddaughter, Maria had told Sarah during one of their last conversations, "The Creator gives us challenges not to break us, but to show us our own strength. Your pain has purpose. Your struggles have meaning. One day, you'll understand why you had to walk this path." Sarah had been successful beyond her wildest dreams, but she had never returned to face those who had caused her so much pain. She had built her life far from Riverside, surrounding herself with people who respected her intelligence and valued her contributions. She had dated, though relationships had always been difficult for her. Trust didn't come easily when you had spent your formative years being systematically dehumanized. She walked to her home office, where awards and certificates covered the walls. The Medal of Honor for Environmental Innovation sat beside her doctorate from MIT. Photos showed her shaking hands with senators, speaking at international conferences, receiving recognition for her work in bringing clean water to remote communities around the world. But none of those achievements had been about proving anything to the people from her past. She had succeeded because her grandmother had taught her that her people's relationship with the earth was sacred, and that protecting it was her responsibility. Her innovations in water purification had helped millions of people access clean drinking water. Her work had meaning beyond personal triumph. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Sarah, it's Tom," came the familiar voice of her business partner. Dr. Tom Wilson had been her classmate at MIT and was now the chief operating officer of her company, Aquatech Solutions. "I'm looking at the quarterly reports, and the numbers from our latest contract are incredible. The project in Bangladesh is ahead of schedule, and the one in Arizona is exceeding all expectations." "That's wonderful news," Sarah replied, though her mind was still on the invitation. "You sound distracted. Everything okay?" Sarah found herself telling Tom about the reunion invitation. He listened quietly as she explained her history with her high school classmates. "You know what I think?" Tom said finally. "I think you should go." "Tom, you don't understand. These people were—" "I understand perfectly," he interrupted gently. "I also understand who you are now. You're Dr. Sarah Blackhorse. You're the woman who revolutionized water purification technology. You're the person who's brought clean water to 3 million people in developing nations. You're my business partner, and you're one of the most brilliant scientists I've ever worked with." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Tom had always been able to see her clearly, without the filters of prejudice or assumption. But more than that, Tom continued, "You're Apache. Your grandmother would be proud of the woman you've become. Maybe it's time to show these people who you really are." After Tom hung up, Sarah walked outside to the garden her grandmother had taught her to plant using traditional methods passed down through generations. The corn, beans, and squash grew in harmony, supporting each other just as Maria had taught her people should do. She thought about the girl she had been, so ashamed of her heritage that she had sometimes wished she could change her skin, her features, her name. That girl had carried so much pain, but she had also carried the seeds of incredible strength. Her grandmother's stories hadn't been burdens, they had been gifts. The connection to the land that her tormentors had mocked wasn't primitive, it was profound. The reunion was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to decide whether to face the demons of her past. That evening, Sarah called her cousin Marcus, who still lived on a reservation and worked as a cultural liaison for the tribal government. "I got an invitation to my high school reunion," she told him. Marcus laughed. "The one where they made your life hell? Are you going?" "I'm thinking about it." "Good. It's about time those people met the real Sarah Blackhorse." "I'm scared, Marcus. What if I go there and I'm still that hurt teenager inside? What if they haven't changed? What if they're still the same cruel people they were 25 years ago?" "Then you'll show them what they lost when they chose cruelty over kindness," Marcus said firmly. "You'll show them what Apache strength looks like. And maybe, just maybe, you'll heal something in yourself that's been broken for too long." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She wandered through her house, touching objects that told the story of her journey. A photo of her graduation from MIT. A crystal award from the United Nations for her humanitarian work. A traditional Apache basket her grandmother had made, sitting next to a modern sculpture from a grateful community in Africa. She stopped at the mirror in her hallway and looked at herself honestly. She was 43 years old now, and the years had been kind to her. Her black hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back in a professional style. Her skin was weathered from years of outdoor research work, but her eyes held a confidence that the 17-year-old Sarah had never possessed. She was no longer the girl who had tried to hide. She was a woman who had transformed pain into purpose, who had taken the very connection to the earth that others had mocked and turned it into a force for healing the world. The next morning, Sarah made her decision. She walked to her computer and began typing a response to Melissa Crawford's message. "Melissa," she wrote, "thank you for the invitation. I will be attending the reunion. I look forward to seeing everyone and sharing what I've been doing these past 25 years. Best regards, Dr. Sarah Blackhorse, CEO of Aquatech Solutions." She hit send before she could change her mind. 3 weeks later, Sarah would walk into that reunion as herself. Fully, proudly, completely herself. And nothing would ever be the same. The weeks following Sarah's decision to attend the reunion passed in a blur of preparation and unexpected emotions. Word of her acceptance had somehow spread through the social media networks of her former classmates, creating a buzz of speculation and curiosity that both amused and unnerved her. Sarah found herself checking the reunion Facebook page more frequently than she cared to admit. The comments had multiplied exponentially since news of her attendance broke. Some expressed genuine excitement, but others carried undertones that transported her right back to those painful teenage years. "Sarah Blackhorse is coming," wrote David Chun, who had been one of the few students who had shown her kindness. "She was always one of the smartest people in our class. Can't wait to catch up." But then there was Lisa Montgomery's comment. "Oh wow, Sarah, I'm so curious to see how you turned out. We all wondered what happened to you after graduation. This should be interesting." The phrase, "how you turned out," sat in Sarah's stomach like a stone, as if she were some sort of experiment they had been conducting, a hypothesis they were finally going to test after 25 years. Sarah threw herself into work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of research and development. Her team was in the final stages of testing a revolutionary new filtration system that could turn contaminated groundwater into drinking water using solar power and materials that could be sourced locally in developing nations. Dr. Blackhorse called Janet Kim, her lead engineer, from across the laboratory. "The efficiency ratings on the new membrane are exceeding our projections by 15%. We're ready for the field trials." Sarah walked over to examine the data, but her mind kept drifting to the reunion. Janet noticed her distraction. "Everything okay, boss? You seem a million miles away." Sarah realized she had been staring at the same column of numbers for several minutes without really seeing them. "Sorry, Janet. I have something personal coming up that's got me a bit unsettled. Want to talk about it?" Sarah found herself describing the reunion situation to Janet, who listened with the focused attention of a good scientist analyzing data. "So if these people were awful to you in high school, and now they want you to come back so they can satisfy their curiosity about what happened to the poor Indian girl," Janet summarized. "And you said yes?" "I said yes." "Good for you. But, boss, please tell me you're not planning to just show up and hope they magically become decent human beings." Sarah laughed despite her nervousness. "What do you mean?" Janet grinned mischievously. "I mean, you're Dr. Sarah Blackhorse. You hold 17 patents. You've revolutionized water purification technology. You've spoken at the United Nations. You've received the Presidential Medal for Science. You run a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. If you're going to face these people, you might as well remind them exactly who they're dealing with." That afternoon, Sarah found herself in a conversation with her executive assistant, Maria Santos, about logistics for the reunion. "The event is at the Riverside Country Club," Maria reported, reading from her computer screen. "Cocktail hour starts at 6, dinner at 7:30. Dress code is formal attire." Sarah nodded absently. Then something occurred to her. Maria, could you reach out to Charlie Yazzie at the helicopter service? I want to ask him about something. Charlie Yazzie was a fellow Apache who ran a luxury helicopter charter service that Sarah had used for business travel. More importantly, he was a veteran pilot who understood the significance of making an impression. When Charlie called back an hour later, Sarah explained what she was thinking. "You want to arrive at your high school reunion by helicopter?" Charlie asked, and she could hear the grin in his voice. "Not just any helicopter, Charlie. I want to arrive in style. I want to remind these people that the girl they dismissed has become someone they couldn't have imagined." "I like it," Charlie said. "I've got a beautiful Eurocopter AS-350 that will be perfect. Sleek, powerful, impossible to ignore. When you step out of that aircraft, every person at that reunion is going to know that Sarah Blackhorse has arrived. Can you land at the country club? Let me make some calls about the permits, but I don't see why not. The club has plenty of open space, and it's not in restricted airspace." After Charlie hung up, Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. She was really going to do this. That evening, she called her cousin Marcus to tell him about her plans. "A helicopter?" Marcus laughed. "Grandmother would have loved this. She always said the spirits would lift us up when we needed to rise above our enemies." "Do you think I'm being too dramatic?" "Sarah, these people spent 4 years trying to crush your spirit. They wanted you to believe you were less than them because of who you are and where you come from. Now you have the chance to show them the truth. Not dramatic, just honest." The next day brought unexpected developments. Sarah's publicist, whom she rarely needed but kept on retainer for major announcements, called with news. "Sarah, I've been getting inquiries from several news outlets about your reunion. Apparently, word has gotten out about your attendance, and some reporter did a little digging into your background. They're very interested in the story." "What kind of inquiries?" "The basic angle is local Native American girl becomes internationally acclaimed scientist and humanitarian. They want to know if you'll do interviews." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "How do they find out?" "Social media, most likely. One of your former classmates probably posted something that caught a reporter's attention. The story of a successful Apache scientist returning to face her past is pretty compelling from a human interest perspective." Sarah asked her publicist to decline all interview requests for now. She wanted to control how this story unfolded, at least until after the reunion itself. But the media attention had an unexpected effect on the reunion planning committee. Sarah received a phone call that afternoon from someone she didn't recognize. "Dr. Blackhorse? This is Amanda Peterson. I'm helping coordinate the reunion, and I want to personally welcome you and see if there's anything special we can do to accommodate your attendance." Amanda's voice carried a level of deference that Sarah found both satisfying and slightly uncomfortable. She was being treated as a VIP, which was a far cry from how she had been treated as a teenager. "I appreciate that, Amanda. I do have one request regarding my arrival." "Of course. Anything you need. I'll be arriving by helicopter, and we'll need clearance to land on the club grounds." There was a pause. "By helicopter?" "Yes. My pilot is handling the permits, but I wanted to give you advance notice." That's wonderful. How exciting. I'll make sure everything is arranged." "Dr. Blackhorse, can I just say how honored we are that someone of your stature is attending our reunion?" After Amanda hung up, Sarah realized that word of her helicopter arrival would spread through the reunion committee faster than wildfire. By the time the event actually happened, everyone would know she was coming and how she was arriving. Good. Let them anticipate. Sarah spent the next week preparing in ways she had never prepared for anything before. She had her hair professionally styled by a stylist who specialized in formal events. She purchased a dress that was both elegant and powerful, a deep burgundy creation that complemented her skin tone and conveyed authority without being flashy. But the most important preparation was mental. Sarah spent hours with her therapist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, working through the complex emotions surrounding the reunion. "You've spent 25 years building a life of incredible achievement," Dr. Martinez observed during one of their sessions. "But you've also spent 25 years carrying the pain these people caused you. What do you hope to accomplish by returning?" "I want them to see who I really am," Sarah replied. "I want them to understand what they lost when they chose cruelty over kindness. And what if they don't? What if they're still the same people they were, just older?" Sarah considered this carefully. Then at least I'll know I face them as myself, completely, authentically myself. I want to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had been brave enough to show them the truth. 3 days before the reunion, Sarah received an unexpected message on LinkedIn. It was from Michael Rodriguez, who had been in her advanced placement chemistry class. Sarah, the message read, "I heard you're coming to the reunion, and I wanted to reach out privately first. I need to apologize for my behavior in high school. I was part of the group that made your life difficult, and I've regretted it for 25 years. I became a teacher partly because I never wanted to see another student go through what you went through. I hope you can forgive me, and I hope we can talk at the reunion." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. It was the first genuine apology she had received from any of her former classmates. It gave her hope that perhaps not everyone had remained frozen in their teenage cruelty. She wrote back, "Michael, thank you for your message. Your apology means more than you know. I look forward to seeing you at the reunion and hearing about your work as an educator." The night before the reunion, Sarah couldn't sleep. She walked through her house, touching the objects that represented her journey. She stopped at a framed photo of her grandmother, taken just a few months before Maria's death. "Tomorrow I face them, grandmother," she whispered to the photo. "I'm scared, but I'm ready." She could almost hear Maria's voice responding. "Fear and courage can live in the same heart, granddaughter. Tomorrow, you show them what Apache strength looks like." Sarah woke up on the morning of the reunion with a clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. The nervous energy that had been building was still there, but it had transformed into something else: determination, purpose, and yes, excitement. Today, she would step out of a helicopter and into her past, carrying with her all the wisdom, success, and dignity she had earned through 25 years of hard work and perseverance. Today, Sarah Blackhorse would finally come home. The morning of the reunion dawned clear and crisp, with a kind of brilliant blue sky that seemed to stretch endlessly over the New Mexico landscape. Sarah stood on her deck, sipping coffee and watching the sun climb over the mountains, feeling a strange mixture of calm and electricity running through her veins. Her phone buzzed with a text from Charlie Yazzie. "Aircraft prepped and ready. Weather conditions perfect for flying. Are you ready to make an entrance?" Sarah smiled as she typed back, "More ready than I've ever been." She spent the morning in meditation, a practice her grandmother had taught her using traditional Apache methods combined with modern mindfulness techniques. Sarah needed to center herself, to connect with the strength of her ancestors and the confidence she had earned through her own achievements. At 2 o'clock, her stylist arrived to help with final preparations. Rebecca Clearwater was a Navajo woman who ran an exclusive salon in Santa Fe and understood the significance of Sarah's appearance today. "Today is about more than looking beautiful," Rebecca said as she worked on Sarah's hair. "Today is about representing your people, your achievements, and your truth." Rebecca styled Sarah's hair in an elegant updo that incorporated subtle elements of traditional Apache hair ornaments made of silver and turquoise that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother. The effect was simultaneously modern and timeless, professional, and deeply cultural. Sarah's dress was a masterpiece of understated power. The deep burgundy fabric was cut in clean, contemporary lines that emphasized her figure without being overly revealing. The color complemented her skin tone beautifully and conveyed authority. She paired it with elegant heels and jewelry that included both modern pieces and traditional Apache silverwork. But the most important accessory was invisible: the confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and what she had accomplished. At 4 o'clock, Charlie arrived with the helicopter. Sarah had seen the aircraft before, but today it looked particularly magnificent. The AS-350 was pristine white with gold accents, sleek and powerful. It was impossible to ignore and completely unforgettable. "You look incredible," Charlie said as he helped her into the aircraft. "Those people are not going to know what hit them." "That's exactly the point," Sarah replied. The flight to Riverside took 45 minutes, giving Sarah time to review her mental preparation one final time. She wasn't going to the reunion to be vindictive or cruel. She was going to be authentically herself, successful, dignified, and proud of her heritage. If that made her former classmates uncomfortable, that was their problem to solve. As they approached the Riverside Country Club, Sarah could see cars filling the parking lot below. The club was situated on a hill overlooking the valley, with manicured grounds and a golf course stretching out in all directions. It represented everything her teenage tormentors had thought she could never achieve: wealth, status, belonging in elite circles. "There's our landing zone," Charlie said, pointing to a large lawn area near the main building. "Looks like we already have an audience." Sarah could see people starting to gather outside the club, probably drawn by the sound of the approaching helicopter. Her heart rate increased, but not with fear, with anticipation. Charlie set the aircraft down with the smooth precision of an expert pilot. Through the window, Sarah could see dozens of people streaming out of the club to see who was arriving. She recognized some of the faces, aged 25 years but still familiar. "You ready for this?" Charlie asked as he shut down the engines. "I've been ready for 25 years, Sarah replied. Charlie came around to help her out of the helicopter, but Sarah had practiced this moment. She stepped out with the grace and confidence of someone accustomed to making important entrances. The wind from the rotors had died down, so her hair and dress remained perfect. The crowd that had gathered to watch fell silent as they realized who had just arrived. Sarah could see the moment of recognition spread through the group like a wave. Mouths fell open. People began pointing and whispering urgently to each other. Sarah walked toward the main building with measured steps, her head held high. She could feel every eye on her, could sense the shock and confusion rippling through the crowd. The quiet Apache girl they remembered had just stepped out a luxury helicopter wearing designer clothes and carrying herself like royalty. The first person to approach her was Amanda Peterson, the reunion coordinator who had helped arrange her landing clearance. "Dr. Blackhorse," Amanda gushed, practically running to reach her. "Welcome. What a spectacular arrival. Everyone is so excited to see you." Behind Amanda came a small group of former classmates, their faces showing various degrees of surprise, curiosity, and what looked like newly discovered respect. "Sarah," called a tentative voice. She turned to see Jennifer Morrison, who had been one of her more persistent tormentors in high school. Jennifer looked older, of course, but well-maintained in the way of someone who had married money and spent her time at country clubs and spas. "Hello, Jennifer," Sarah replied warmly but formally. "It's good to see you. I can't believe you came in a helicopter," Jennifer stammered. "Yes, it's much more convenient than driving," Sarah replied matter-of-factly, "especially when you're traveling from out of state for business meetings." She could see Jennifer trying to process this information. The implication was clear. Sarah was important enough, busy enough, and successful enough that helicopter travel was routine for her. More people approached, and Sarah found herself in the surreal position of receiving enthusiastic greetings from people who had made her teenage years miserable. Their attitudes had transformed completely. Where once there had been mockery and dismissal, now there was deference and curiosity. "Sarah, you look absolutely stunning," gushed Melissa Crawford, the woman whose private message had revealed the real reason for her invitation. "We're all dying to hear what you've been up to all these years." Sarah smiled politely. "I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to catch up during dinner." What struck Sarah most was how these people seemed to have no awareness of the irony of their behavior. They were treating her like a celebrity now, but she was fundamentally the same person they had rejected and ridiculed 25 years earlier. The only thing that had changed was their perception of her value, based on external markers of success. As they moved toward the club's entrance, Sarah noticed Michael Rodriguez standing slightly apart from the main group. When their eyes met, he approached her with a different energy than the others. Less excitement, more solemnity. "Sarah," he said quietly, "thank you for responding to my message. I meant every word." "I know you did, Michael. And I appreciate your courage in reaching out. Can we talk privately later? There are some things I need to say." Sarah nodded. "I like that." Inside the country club, the reunion was in full swing. The cocktail hour had been underway for an hour, and the arrival of the helicopter had clearly been the most exciting thing to happen. Sarah could feel conversations stopping as she entered rooms, could see people nudging each other and pointing in her direction. The reunion committee had prepared name tags with senior yearbook photos, and Sarah grimaced slightly when she saw hers. The image showed a thin, serious-looking girl with long, straight hair partially covering her face, someone who looked like she was trying to disappear. She pinned the tag to her dress and immediately understood its power. The contrast between the frightened teenager in the photo and the confident woman wearing it was impossible to ignore. "Dr. Sarah Blackhorse," called a voice from across the room. She turned to see David Chun approaching with genuine warmth in his expression. David had been one of the few students who had treated her with kindness during high school. "David, it's wonderful to see you," Sarah replied, and for the first time that evening, her smile was completely genuine. "I heard about your work with water purification systems," David said. "My company does international development work, and we've actually implemented some of your technologies in our projects in Africa. You're changing the world, Sarah." "Thank you, David. That means a lot coming from you." As they talked, Sarah noticed a crowd gathering around them, people clearly straining to overhear their conversation. She realized that many of her former classmates were learning about her achievements for the first time. "You developed the AquaPure system?" asked Brad Stevens, who had been one of the worst of her tormentors. His voice carried a note of disbelief. "Among other things, yes," Sarah replied evenly. "But that that system is being used all over the world. It saved millions of lives." Sarah could see Brad struggling to reconcile the successful scientist she had become with the primitive Indian girl he had mocked in high school. The cognitive dissonance was almost painful to watch. "Yes, it has helped a lot of people access clean water," Sarah agreed simply. As the cocktail hour continued, Sarah found herself at the center of attention in a way she had never experienced during high school. People who had never spoken to her were now eager to claim some connection, to remember some interaction that proved they had always recognized her potential. The most surreal moment came when Lisa Montgomery approached her near the bar. "Sarah, I have to ask," Lisa said with wide eyes, "how did you become so successful? What was your secret?" Sarah stared at Lisa for a moment, remembering the girl who had once asked if Indians lived in teepees and whether Sarah knew how to use indoor plumbing. "No secret, Lisa. I just worked hard, got an excellent education, and refused to let other people's ignorance define my limitations." Lisa laughed nervously. "Well, you certainly proved everyone wrong." "I didn't prove anyone wrong," Sarah replied quietly. "I just became who I always had the potential to become. The only thing that was wrong was the assumption some people made about me." The comment hung in the air between them, and Sarah could see Lisa beginning to understand the implications of what she had said. As they moved toward the dining room for dinner, Sarah caught sight of herself in a mirror near the entrance. The woman looking back at her was poised, elegant, and completely comfortable in her own skin. She wore her success naturally, without arrogance or apology. But, more importantly, she wore her identity as an Apache woman with pride. The silver jewelry, the subtle nods to traditional aesthetics in her appearance, the quiet dignity that came from knowing her place in a lineage of strong women, all of it was on full display. She was no longer the girl who had tried to hide her heritage. She was a woman who understood that her connection to her people and her culture was one of her greatest strengths. The evening was just beginning, but Sarah already knew that she had accomplished what she came to do. She had shown these people exactly who Sarah Blackhorse had become. Now she would enjoy watching them come to terms with their own assumptions and prejudices. The dining room of the Riverside Country Club had been decorated with the school colors, blue and gold, and tables were arranged in a way that encouraged mingling and conversation. Each table had been assigned a theme representing different aspects of high school life: student government, athletics, academic honors, arts, and drama, and so forth. Sarah noticed with wry amusement that she had been assigned to the academic honors table, along with several other former high achievers. It was as if the reunion committee had suddenly remembered that she had been valedictorian of their class, a fact that seemed to have escaped the notice of many of her tormentors during their school years. As people found their seats, Sarah observed the social dynamics playing out around her. Her former classmates were clustering in groups that largely reflected their old high school hierarchies, but there was a new energy in the room centered around her presence. She had become the evening's main attraction, and everyone seemed to want to position themselves within her orbit. "Sarah," called Tom Fletcher, who had been student body president. "I saved you a seat at our table. We were just talking about how proud we are that Riverside High produced someone of your caliber." Sarah accepted the seat, but noted the revisionist history in Tom's comment. During high school, the student government crowd had been among the most indifferent to her existence, neither cruel nor kind, simply treating her as invisible. As the first course was served, Sarah found herself fielding a constant stream of questions about her career, her company, and her achievements. The attention was flattering, but also somewhat hollow. These people were interested in her success, not in her as a person. "I have to ask," said Patricia Williams, who had been the head cheerleader, "how did you get from here to where you are now? It's such an incredible transformation." Sarah set down her fork and looked at Patricia thoughtfully. "I'm not sure I would call it a transformation, Patricia. I think I became exactly who I was meant to become. The capacity was always there. It just took time and opportunity to develop it. But surely you must have changed dramatically since high school," Patricia pressed. "I mean, you were so different then." "Different how?" Sarah asked quietly. Patricia looked uncomfortable, suddenly, realizing she was venturing into dangerous territory. "Well, you were just quieter, more withdrawn. I was quieter because I was struggling to survive in an environment where many people made it clear that I wasn't welcome," Sarah replied with gentle firmness. "That tends to make a person withdraw." An uncomfortable silence fell over their immediate area. Several people shifted in their seats, and Sarah could see the dawning realization in some faces that they might have contributed to the withdrawal she was describing. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the reunion's main organizer, Steve Harrison, who had been the star quarterback and was clearly accustomed to being the center of attention at events like this. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve announced from the front of the room, "if I could have your attention for a moment. As you all know, we have a very special guest with us tonight. Dr. Sarah Blackhorse has become one of the most distinguished graduates our school has ever produced." Sarah felt every eye in the room turned toward her. She maintained her composure, but inside she was noting the irony of being celebrated by the same people who had spent 4 years trying to diminish her. "Sarah," Steve continued, "would you mind saying a few words to your former classmates? We'd all love to hear about your incredible journey." Sarah hadn't expected to be put on the spot like this, but she rose gracefully from her seat. As she walked to the front of the room, she could feel the weight of history in every step. The last time she had stood in front of these people, she had been giving the valedictorian speech to a largely indifferent audience who seemed surprised that the quiet Indian girl had been their academic leader. "Thank you, Steve," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "It's interesting to be back here after so many years, looking at faces I remember so well." She paused, scanning the room and making eye contact with several of her former tormentors. "You know, people often ask me about the key to success, and I've given that question a lot of thought over the years. I think success comes from understanding who you are and refusing to let other people's limitations become your own." Another pause. She could see some people shifting uncomfortably. "In high school, I learned some very valuable lessons. I learned that people's prejudices and assumptions often say more about them than about their targets. I learned that knowledge and education are forms of power that no one can take away from you. And I learned that sometimes the greatest gift people can give you is their underestimation, because it frees you from their expectations and allows you to become exactly who you're meant to be." The room was completely silent now. Sarah could see faces reflecting various emotions: shame, recognition, admiration, and, in some cases, what looked like the first stirrings of genuine respect. "I've been fortunate to build a career that allows me to help people around the world access clean water, one of the most basic human needs. That work has been deeply fulfilling, but it's rooted in values I learned long before I ever left this community." She gestured toward the windows that looked out over the desert landscape. "My grandmother taught me that water is sacred, that our relationship with the earth is a responsibility, not a privilege. She taught me that our people's traditions and knowledge are treasures, not sources of shame. She taught me that strength comes from understanding your roots and growing from them, not from cutting them away." Sarah could see tears in some eyes now, including some that belonged to people who had been unkind to her decades earlier. So when people ask me about success, I tell them it's not about proving anything to anyone else. It's about honoring the gifts you've been given and using them to make the world a little better than you found it. She paused one final time, letting her words settle. Thank you for inviting me tonight. It's been illuminating to see everyone again. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Sarah could see it meant different things to different people. For some, it was genuine admiration. For others, it seemed like an attempt to align themselves with her success. And for a few, she could see the weight of recognition, understanding, perhaps for the first time, what they had lost when they chose cruelty over kindness all those years ago. As Sarah returned to her seat, she was intercepted by several people wanting to speak with her privately. The first was Michael Rodriguez, the teacher who had apologized via LinkedIn. "Sarah, could we step outside for a moment?" he asked quietly. They walked out onto the club's terrace, where the evening air was cool and the lights of the valley sparkled below them. "I need to tell you something," Michael began, his voice heavy with emotion. "What you said in there about underestimation being a gift. I understand exactly what you mean, and I'm ashamed to say I was part of the group that underestimated you." Sarah waited for him to continue. "I was a coward in high school," he said simply. "I saw what was happening to you, and I did nothing. Worse than nothing, I sometimes participated because I was afraid that if I stood up for you, they would turn on me too." "Michael, no, please let me finish. I became a teacher because I never wanted to see another student go through what you went through. I've spent 25 years trying to create the kind of classroom environment where every student feels valued and respected regardless of their background." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of a diverse group of teenagers holding a science fair trophy. "This is my AP chemistry class from last year. See that girl in the center? Maria Santos. She's Apache, like you. Brilliant, like you." And when some of the other kids started making ignorant comments about Native Americans, I shut it down immediately. I told them about a classmate I once knew who was smarter than all of us put together, who went on to change the world, and who deserved better from us than she received. Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. "You told them about me?" "I told them about the importance of respecting everyone's potential. Maria won the state science fair, by the way. She's heading to MIT on a full scholarship." "Michael, that's incredible. I can't change what happened to you, Sarah, but I've tried to make sure it doesn't happen to other students on my watch. Your experience taught me something important about the responsibility we all have to protect each other's dignity." As they talked, Sarah realized that Michael's growth represented the possibility she had hoped for but hadn't quite believed in, that people could learn from their mistakes and become better versions of themselves. When they returned inside, Sarah was approached by David Chun, who had been kind to her in high school. "Sarah, I want to tell you something," David said. "Your speech tonight was powerful, but what impressed me most was your grace. You could have used this moment to tear people down, to make them feel as small as they once made you feel. Instead, you chose dignity." "There would be no point in causing pain," Sarah replied. "Pain was never the problem. Ignorance was. And ignorance can be cured with education and experience. You're a remarkable woman, Sarah Blackhorse. I'm honored to call you a classmate." As the evening continued, Sarah found herself in numerous conversations that ranged from superficial small talk to surprisingly deep reflections on growth and change. Some of her former classmates seemed genuinely interested in learning from her experience, while others appeared more focused on associating themselves with her success. The most surprising moment came when Melissa Crawford approached her near the end of the evening. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," Melissa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was horrible to you in high school. I said terrible things, and I made your life harder than it needed to be." Sarah studied Melissa's face, looking for signs of insincerity, but saw only genuine remorse. "Why?" Sarah asked simply. "Honestly, I was insecure and ignorant, and you made me feel stupid without even trying. You were so smart, so composed, even when we were being awful to you. It made me feel small, and I handled that by trying to make you feel smaller." Melissa's honesty was unexpected and more valuable than any of the evening's praise. "I appreciate your honesty, Melissa. That took courage. I have a daughter now," Melissa continued. She's 16, and if anyone treated her the way I treated you, I would be devastated. I think about that a lot. As the reunion began winding down, Sarah realized that the evening had accomplished something she hadn't expected. Yes, she had shown these people who she had become. But, more importantly, she had seen who they had become and who they were still becoming. Some had remained trapped in their old patterns of thinking. Others had grown and learned and developed empathy. The evening had been a mirror that reflected not just her transformation, but theirs as well. When Charlie texted that he was ready for departure, Sarah felt a sense of completion. She had faced her past honestly and authentically, and she was ready to return to her life with a new sense of peace about this chapter of her history. As the reunion evening drew to a close, Sarah found herself on the terrace of the country club, looking out over the valley where she had spent some of the most difficult years of her life. The lights of the town twinkled below, and in the distance, she could see the reservation where her grandmother had raised her with so much love and wisdom. Charlie had texted that he would be ready for departure in 15 minutes, giving Sarah time to process the complex emotions of the evening. She felt lighter somehow, as if a weight she had carried for 25 years had finally been lifted. "There you are," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see David Chun approaching with 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might want some caffeine before your flight home." "Thank you, David. That's thoughtful." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both reflecting on the evening's events. "You know," David said finally, "I've been thinking about what you said in your speech, about underestimation being a gift. I think you're right, but I also think you paid too high a price for that gift." Sarah considered this. "Maybe, but I'm not sure I would change anything, even if I could. Those difficult experiences shaped me in ways that I think made me stronger, more empathetic, more determined to use whatever success I achieved to help others. Still, you shouldn't have had to go through it alone." "I wasn't alone," Sarah replied, touching the silver pendant at her throat, one of her grandmother's pieces. "I had my grandmother's wisdom, my culture's strength, and eventually I found people like you and my business partner Tom who saw my worth." As they talked, other classmates began making their way outside to say goodbye. Sarah was struck by how different these final conversations felt compared to the initial greetings. There was more substance now, more honesty, and in some cases, more genuine connection than she had ever experienced with these people during high school. Jennifer Morrison approached with obvious nervousness. "Sarah, I hope this isn't presumptuous, but I wanted to give you my contact information. My daughter is interested in environmental science, and I was wondering if you might be willing to speak with her sometime about career opportunities." Sarah smiled, remembering Jennifer as one of her more persistent tormentors. The fact that Jennifer was now asking for her help, and specifically for her daughter's benefit, represented a complete reversal of their old dynamic. "I'd be happy to speak with her, Jennifer. Please have her email me. Thank you so much. This means the world to me." As Jennifer walked away, Sarah reflected on the evening's most important revelation. Many of her former classmates had become parents, and parenthood had given them a new perspective on the cruelty they had once inflicted. Seeing their own children's vulnerabilities had awakened empathy for the vulnerable teenager they had once targeted. The realization didn't excuse their past behavior, but it did help explain some of the genuine remorse she had witnessed tonight. Brad Stevens, who had been one of her most vocal tormentors, appeared at her elbow looking deeply uncomfortable. "Sarah, I don't really know how to say this, but I need to tell you I'm sorry. I was a complete jerk to you in high school, and there's no excuse for it." Sarah turned to face him fully. "What changed your mind, Brad?" "Honestly, my son, he's 17 now, and he's been having a hard time at school. Some kids have been picking on him because he's dyslexic, calling him stupid, making him feel like he doesn't belong. Watching him go through that, it made me remember what we did to you, and it made me sick to my stomach." Brad's voice cracked slightly. "My kid comes home, sometimes with this look in his eyes, like he's trying to figure out what's wrong with him that makes people want to hurt him. And I realize that's probably how you looked every day, and we never even saw it. We never saw you as a real person with real feelings." "I'm sorry your son is going through that," Sarah said sincerely. "It's never easy to feel like you don't belong. How did you get through it? How did you not let it destroy you?" Sarah thought about the question carefully. My grandmother taught me that other people's opinions of me were not facts about me. She taught me that my worth came from who I was inside, from my connection to my people and my culture, from my potential to contribute something meaningful to the world. I don't know if my son has that kind of foundation. Then you give it to him, Sarah said firmly. You tell him every day that he's valuable, that he's loved, that his differences are strengths, not weaknesses. You become the voice that's louder than the ones trying to tear him down. Brad nodded, tears visible in his eyes. Thank you, Sarah, for being gracious enough to even talk to me. As Brad walked away, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. The evening had become about more than settling old scores or proving her worth. It had become about breaking cycles of pain and creating possibilities for healing. Patricia Williams, the former cheerleader, approached with a group of women who had once been part of the popular crowd. Sarah, Patricia said, we've been talking and we wanted to ask you something. We're all involved in various charitable activities now, and we were wondering if you might be willing to speak at some of our events. Your story is so inspiring, and we think it could really make a difference. Sarah paused, recognizing the irony. The same people who had once excluded her from their social circles now wanted to use her story to enhance their charitable endeavors. I appreciate the invitation, Patricia, but my speaking engagements are generally focused on environmental issues and scientific education. If any of your organizations work in those areas, please have them contact my office directly. The message was polite but clear. Sarah would engage with their causes if they aligned with her values, but she wouldn't allow herself to be used as a token or trophy. As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself in conversation with Steve Harrison, the former quarterback who had introduced her speech. Sarah, I have to admit something, Steve said with uncharacteristic humility. In high school, I never paid much attention to academics or to kids like you. I was all about sports and popularity, and I thought that was what mattered. It didn't matter, Steve. It just wasn't the only thing that mattered. Right, exactly. But I never understood that then. I thought success was about being the star, being the center of attention. You've shown us all what real success looks like, making a difference, building something meaningful, having an impact that lasts. Steve's comment resonated with Sarah because it highlighted one of the evening's most significant realizations. Definitions of success had evolved for many of her classmates. The markers of high school popularity, athletic achievement, social status, superficial attractiveness, had proven less durable than the intellectual gifts and character strengths that had made her an outcast at 17. Charlie appeared in the doorway, signaling that it was time for departure. As Sarah prepared to leave, she was surrounded by classmates wanting final words, contact information, and promises to stay in touch. The attention felt genuine from some and performative from others, but Sarah graciously accepted all of it. She had accomplished what she came to do. She had shown these people exactly who Sarah Blackhorse had become, and in doing so, she had forced them to confront their own assumptions and prejudices. As they walked toward the helicopter, Sarah was accompanied by a small group of classmates who wanted to witness her departure. The aircraft sat on the lawn like a symbol of everything she had achieved: technological sophistication, financial success, and the power to rise above any situation. This has been incredible, David said as Charlie began his pre-flight preparations. Promise me you won't disappear for another 25 years. I promise, Sarah replied, and she meant it. Tonight had taught her that maintaining connections didn't require her to diminish herself or hide her achievements. She could engage with these people as equals now, without the power imbalances that had defined their relationships in high school. Michael Rodriguez appeared at her side. Sarah, I want you to know that Monday morning, I'm going to tell my students about tonight. Not the details, but the lesson about how treating people with dignity and respect isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. You never know who might change the world. That's a good lesson, Michael. Thank you for learning it. As Sarah climbed into the helicopter, she took one last look at the country club and the group of people watching her departure. 25 years ago, she had left this community as a wounded teenager, carrying the scars of their cruelty and rejection. Tonight, she was leaving as a successful woman who had transformed that pain into purpose. The helicopter rose into the night sky, and Sarah watched the lights of Riverside shrink below her. She felt a profound sense of closure, as if a chapter that had remained unfinished for decades had finally reached its proper conclusion. Charlie's voice came through the headset. "How is it, Dr. Blackhorse? Did you get what you came for?" Sarah smiled as she looked out at the vast expanse of desert and mountains stretching toward home. "I got more than I came for, Charlie. I got peace." As they flew through the star-filled sky toward her home in the mountains, Sarah reflected on the evening's most important lesson. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing other people's behavior or pretending that pain hadn't happened. It was about refusing to let that pain continue to shape your present and future. She had forgiven her tormentors not because they deserved it, but because she deserved the freedom that forgiveness brought. She had shown them who she had become, not to prove anything to them, but to complete her own transformation from victim to victor. The reunion had been an ending, but more importantly, it had been a beginning, a chance to engage with her past from a position of strength and to model for others what healing and growth looked like. When they landed at her property an hour later, Sarah stood on her deck looking up at the same stars that had watched over her grandmother, her ancestors, and countless generations of Apache people who had faced their own challenges with dignity and strength. She was exactly where she belonged, successful, proud, and completely at peace with the journey that had brought her home. The next morning, Sarah woke to find her phone filled with messages from classmates, friend requests on social media, and even a few interview requests from local news outlets who had somehow learned about her dramatic reunion appearance. But the message that meant the most came from Michael Rodriguez. "Thank you for showing us what grace looks like. You've inspired me to be a better teacher and a better person." Sarah smiled as she deleted most of the messages and responded only to the ones that felt genuine. She had work to do, water purification systems to design, communities to serve, and a world to help heal. The reunion was over, but the real work of her life continued. And now she could do that work with a lighter heart, knowing that she had finally, completely, courageously faced her past and emerged victorious, not through revenge, but through the simple, powerful act of being authentically herself.